I am seeing one of the biggest mistakes that so many people, so many homeowners, maybe you, are making in today's market. And in this video, it's going to be extremely important to pay attention because these mistakes can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars depending how you're doing it. And the problem with these mistakes is you're thinking it's the right thing to do when it could be the exact opposite and it could be harming you more than you know. Let's get right in this video, guys, and enjoy. Just kidding. Before we get into the video, if you get any value, hit the like button. Now let's start. So I know people who own houses who have a huge amount of equity. Now I'm telling you, not like $10,000, $50,000. No, I'm saying they bought their house a couple years ago, last year, 3 years, 5 years ago, and they got hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity depending on their price point. And what they're saying, what they're planning to do is they're like, the market is so hot. What if, just what if, I listed my house on the market, I cashed out $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 cash, and then I waited for the market to crash, the housing market to crash, and then I get back in at a better opportunity. But what they aren't accounting for is two things. Yes, they're sitting on a ton of equity, a ton of cash essentially. Yes, they can make a killing on the sale, but they're not accounting for, number one, the housing market might not crash like they're thinking, either substantially or even a little bit. Keep in mind, depending on what state you're in, anybody who's watching this video right now, I want you to comment below what state you're in and then say the state and the city. I'm in Dallas, Texas. Now, depending on the state that you're in, houses could in fact keep going up or in fact not crash and maybe just stay at the same level they're at right now or barely just retrace a little bit and correct. Everybody is assuming a crash is going to happen everywhere or even a crash is going to happen indefinitely, which is not true. Now, keeping in mind that you're selling your house, you're cashing out so much equity from it and you're essentially just selling it and letting go of it and taking all your money with the hopes that the market's going to crash. People say that Texas specifically is recession proof. So if you're doing that in Texas, you might not see what you're thinking you're going to see. Even if the market were to crash, it might not be as hardly crashed in Texas. Now you might be somewhere else where if it crashes or if the market, the interest rates start to go up and the supply starts to pick up and lumber costs and all this stuff start to get better, you might see a dip in the price a lot more than we would see here, for example, in Texas. But that doesn't defeat the purpose that making a sale based off of assuming that guaranteed the housing market is going to crash is the number one mistake. You can't assume that because there's no guarantees. And number two, when you make the sale, you're going to have to either go rent a house or buy a house. But I'm assuming since you sold, you're waiting for the market to crash, so you're going to go rent. Now you're going to have to go rent a house or rent an apartment. Minimum, you're going to spend $1,500. I'm speaking over here in the Dallas, Texas area, minimum. And that probably won't even be at the lifestyle your house was at. And $1,500 minimum is going to be thrown in the trash. That's $18,000 a year. Okay? Let's say it takes 2 years for the housing market to crash like you're saying. That's $18,000 times 2. Whatever that number is, you're almost at $36,000. Correct me if I'm wrong. You got 2, 4, yeah, you're at $36,000. Now, that's $36,000 that you just lost. So the $100,000 that you made off of the house sale or the $200,000, however much you made, that is essentially going to be cut by $36,000. Now, keep in mind, if you sold a nice house and you made $300,000, $400,000 within your equity as well as the sale, getting it at the peak price, you're more than likely going to go in an expensive apartment or an expensive house paying $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month, especially if you got a big family. That's aside from moving costs, aside from relocating, aside from finding, aside from expenses that just pop up. So guys, people are not accounting for selling their house based off of a housing crash that's going to happen in the future. That's the number one mistake. And number two, they're not accounting for when they sell their house, the moving costs it's going to take, the finding the place, the renting the place, the amount of time they're going to have to rent it until the market does crash. Also, the commissions whenever they sell their house, also closing costs whenever they sell their house. All of these things take away from your bottom line. So all of these things taken away from your bottom line means that your grand plan, your I'm gonna make a killing with this peak market might not be as good as you think. You got to take in consideration everything. Number one, the housing market might not crash like you're thinking. And number two, there's going to be so much cost associated with that transfer, with that sell, with that close, with all of it. And most importantly, guys, there's so many talking about there's going to be a housing crash and it's indefinite and it's going to happen and it's coming, it's here, it's all that. And I talk a lot about it. But you gotta keep in mind, there's no actual date for it. There's no actual time frame for it. What I believe is what keeps going up eventually has to come down. There's truth to that. But there's also truth to low interest rates staying to calm down the market and keep everybody continuing on lending and buying. Then you're talking about the low supply. That's going to keep demand up because there's not many options. Then you're talking about new builds are not catching up and new builds are so expensive to do. And all of these things make it believe and realize that so long these stay like that, so long you can expect the market to stay strong. And then associating what city and state you're in, guys, that's huge. If you're in a very hot state that's booming and growing, Texas for us, Austin, Texas, Dallas, Texas, these areas, then you're going to expect that it's going to be a lot stronger, even if there's going to be a hit to the market. And there's going to be a lot stronger markets than Texas and a lot weaker markets than Texas. So all of it is something that you have to account for depending on where you live. So for those of you who are like, it's time to make a killing, I'm going to sell my house, I'm going to wait for the crash, and then I'm going to rebuy into it. Take a step back, think that through, and be careful before you make that move. The last thing that you want to do is sell your house that your family is living in, that you actually love, to make an extra 100 grand, only to realize that you drained that 100 grand renting and the housing crash never happened. And then you have to jump back into a very hot market, rebuy at peak, and you're like, I wish I never did that. So be very careful. Make sure that you make educated and smart moves and calculated moves, not just moves that make sense because it looks pretty on paper. Anyways, guys, remember I upload 3 times a week, and most importantly, subscribe so you can catch all these videos. And don't forget, if you got any value, I'd really appreciate it that you hit that like button. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all later. I'm out.